Hi, I'm Tim Ryan. Good morning. Thank you for being a teacher. I just left a teacher home in bed. It's my wife. Don't worry about it. So we know in the Ryan household the ins and outs and ups and downs of being a teacher. And when Chris gave me the opportunity to come and be with you this morning, the first thing I want to say to you is thank you for the work that you do. We know these years get long, and we know that there's a lot of outside forces and challenges in our community that teachers are faced to deal with every single day that come into your classroom. And we know how tough it is, but we also know how rewarding it is. But I want you to know how much we are relying on you. It was apparent in the last few weeks and months in our community that while we have our set of challenges here, we also have a lot of opportunities in our community that are developing. And we were at Youngstown State Stadium last night, the Zach Brown's band concert with 17,000 people in downtown Youngstown. We see what's happening at the local incubator. We see what's happening with the additive manufacturing. We see what's happening in Youngstown City schools. This is the turnaround story that the country is going to be talking about in the next couple years. And we've got to get the education system right. And, you know, we have challenges in our community. Just think about it. We've got opiates, we've got violence, we've got poverty, we've got challenges that are in every city and rural area across the country. And there are also global challenges. There are about 3 billion people in the next 2 decades that are going to be aspiring to move into the middle class around the world. 3 billion people. And those people are going to consume about 300% more than they're consuming now. So you've got 3 billion more people moving into the middle class around the world. You've got them consuming way more on a planet that is heating up by 6 degrees Celsius over the next 50 or 60 years with climate change. And I don't share this with you, we're supposed to hear to motivate you, inspire you. I'm not here to get you depressed, but I want you to know that I know I want, and I know you want, the kids coming out of Youngstown City schools have got to be prepared to help us solve these problems. These are challenges that our planet, our country, has not seen. And we only have 330 million people in the country. We've got to have every single child from every school district ready to compete in that global economy and help us solve the challenges that the world is now faced with. And I want those kids to come out of Youngstown City schools to help us solve these problems. I'll tell you a quick story because we got a great speaker here today. Another Irish guy, first name Tim. Smarter than me, he's better looking at me. I don't know why they invited him to this place, But I want to tell you a quick story. So when I first got to Congress, for a long time while I was in Congress, I was single. And then I got married about 4 years ago. And the triumph of hope over experience, I understand. So I went from being single to being married. So slight lifestyle change. And then the woman I married had 2 kids. So I went from being single to being married with 2 kids. Slight lifestyle change. So she got rid of her place and I got rid of my place, so we got a neutral place. So what do you do when you get married? You got a new stepkids. You got to go out and get a dog, right? So we go out to get a dog. And what do you do when you go out to get a dog with 2 kids? Come back with 2 dogs. And then about 3 years ago we had Brady. So single to married, 3 kids, 2 dogs. And something happened a couple years back that I hadn't noticed happen in the house for a while. And I noticed it, and it was silence. The house was quiet. Everybody was upstairs. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And they were all in bed. They were probably all in the same bed. If dogs, kids, it's a whole other speech and story. But anyway, I get the remote control, because I hadn't had the remote control in a while. And I start flipping through the channels. So, you know, dude from Mahoning Valley, what do you start finding? Like a sports channel, right? So, clipping through. And I see this documentary with Jimmy Valvano. Remember Jimmy V, the basketball coach? And he was giving this speech. And he said, God must have loved ordinary people, because he made so many of us. But every day, ordinary people do extraordinary things. Every day, in so many different ways, ordinary people do extraordinary things. And to me, that is what teaching and educating is all about. Helping ordinary kids from a place like Youngstown be able to do something extraordinary that you can look at and say, I taught that kid. I changed that kid's life. I changed the trajectory of that kid's life. Because I loved him, because I cared about him, and I taught him. I brought out what was already in there. Because that's all you're really doing, is you're just bringing it out. It's in there. And you're bringing it out and giving these kids an opportunity to do extraordinary things. And I thank you for that. And we thank you for that. And it is so critically important for our community and for our country that we start producing and keep producing kids that can help solve these great challenges. You know, these kids, what I've learned over the last few years, studying the brain science, and Tim Shriver will go into a lot of this as well. But when your brain goes into fight or flight mode, it literally takes offline the part of the brain you need to learn. Your executive functions, your working memory, your decision making, all in your prefrontal cortex gets hijacked by the old part of your brain that's got you in fight or flight. So if we even want to begin teaching these kids, we've got to first and foremost get their brains out of fight or flight mode. And we all know that many of these kids show up in school with either a high level or a low level of fight or flight, because of the neighborhood, because of the family, because of the situations that they live in. So our job, collectively, is to love them, care for them, teach them how to get themselves out of fight or flight mode, and begin to access their executive functions so we could actually teach them. And that's why I love the work that Tim Shriver has dedicated his life and career to. He's the chairman of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And he will educate all of us more deeply about the importance of the social and emotional skills that kids need before you even get to the learning process, because of how it stabilizes them. He's very well educated. He's got a degree from Yale. He's got a master's degree from the Catholic University in Washington, D.C. He has a PhD from the University of Connecticut. He also has a book here that the newer teachers are going to get, and the title of the book is Fully Alive. Those of you who don't get a copy should leave here and go to Amazon.com and help a brother out by buying the book. But Tim, let me just say quickly, why Tim's work is important is because he's getting us all out of the mindset that it's not just about educating the head, it's about educating the heart, and that makes all the difference. And we are lucky to have him here, but he has dedicated his life and his career and his profile to making deep structural changes in the field of education. So give a warm Youngstown, Ohio welcome to one of the great leaders in the education movement, Tim Shriver.
It's the old lower the mic situation after Tim Ryan. Thank you, Congressman Ryan. Thank you, Krish, for having me. Thanks all of you for being here when it's not every day you hear a congressman get up and talk about executive function and emotional hijacks and prefrontal cortexes and fight or flight. I just wanted him to continue just a little further with applying that fight or flight to the marriage conversation, the earlier part of his talk. Because I've been married not 4 years, but 31 years, and I think he probably has some insights from the science. Yeah, thank you. That wasn't supposed to be an applause line. That was begging for insight line. After all these years, we all still need it. But anyway, I want to first of all congratulate all of you for being here. I want to say a special thanks to Tim, to Pat Lowry, who used to be on Tim's staff, now is here in the district, to Krish, to all of you for making this commitment. I mean, this is, from what I gather, a new era in the mentality, in the focus, in the commitment, in the vision of the Youngstown Teaching Corps. And your presence here is about a sort of a new statement, a commitment to learning, to your own development, to your own health, to your own wellness, to your kids, to your district, to your city, to your state, to your country. And when you get in a moment like this, you know, sometimes you don't see it until later, but somebody from the outside can walk in and say, hey, guess what, you guys are in a moment. So part of what I'm here to do is just congratulate you for being willing to be in this moment, for opting in to the vision that's now being put in front of you, and to following a congressman who's rare. Let's be honest, in a moment of seriousness, you don't find many people in political life who talk about mindfulness, who talk about vulnerability, who talk about silence, and who talk about those gifts as the secret to a new fabric in a country. You all are maybe used to seeing a big, funny, smart, Irish congressman in this district. You may be accustomed, but let me say, from a person who's not from here, a lot of people are looking at Tim Ryan, not just for what he can do for Ohio, but for what he can do for the country because of the quality of his leadership. So keep your eye on New Hampshire. Just kidding, just kidding. Congressman Ryan mentioned that I have a book called Fully Alive, and I just want to say at the beginning that I was reminded last night of Zach Brown. I haven't been to a country music concert, well, in a long time. My oldest daughter is a country music fan, but it's been a long time. So I'm wandering in to the country music concert, 18,000 people in downtown Youngstown. I mean, everybody says Youngstown's beat up. I'm here for 24 hours. All I see is action everywhere. So I don't know what the complaints are, but it reminded me. I went on a short book tour when this book came out that some of you are going to get a chance to use as a doorstop, maybe. So I went into, I won't say where, I was in a southern city, further south from here, and I was in a hotel, and I get on the elevator to go up to the mezzanine where there's a little reception, you know, for a book signing kind of thing. And the guy's on the elevator already, and he's got a 10-gallon hat and blue jeans and a big, huge silver belt buckle and cowboy boots. Looks like a country music fan. And he looks over at me. I push, mezzanine, so it's a short ride. And he says, anyone ever tell you you look like a Kennedy? So, my mind is scrambled about the next event and so on. So I'm kind of, it's not a conversation I really want to get into right now. So I just say, I've heard that before. So the door opens up and he says, that must really piss you off, huh? So I was kind of watching my back last night at Zach Brown. No. What can I say? It's a diverse country. Who knew? So anyway, I've got about a half an hour. And by the way, for those of you who are not on the stage, I wish I could take a picture so you could see exactly the exact configuration of every teacher meeting, which is the back rows jammed with teachers who spend their life telling kids to come up and sit in the front. You all know what I mean in the back. There will be special questions that have to be answered by people in the back row coming up in a second. So just be prepared. You're not getting out of the woods. I want to open with this image of Archimedes, not because we're going to get into Greek stuff, but because I want to pick up on something Congressman Ryan just said. This is an image that is emblematic of the quote from Archimedes, and it's translated a lot of different ways, but basically it says, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I can move the world. The idea that the right leverage can change everything. The right strength, the right place to stand. I use this today to pick up on what Tim just said. If you ask me about the condition of the country, the condition of our young people, the condition of our communities today, and start to say, what could make a difference? What is likely to be able to make a significant difference in the future of our country? What institution? What group of people? If you ask me, the lever in today's culture is you. It's educators. With all due respect, I do not have confidence that our political leaders will get us there. No disrespect, it's an important profession. We need better people in it. We have great people in it. No disrespect to the academy, no disrespect to business, no disrespect to scholars, no disrespect to all those institutions, even religious institutions. No disrespect to any of them. But if I were betting on one set of people, one institution, one group, one system that could, in fact, make a difference, reunite our country, create stronger, healthier young people, inspire people to believe in themselves and in their future, I would bet on this room. So, and I say that with the greatest, I hope, of seriousnesses. Now, we all know this is really weird that this is happening. Because right here, I mean, I could turn this around and show you, it looks great on this computer. We had this unifying moment. I don't know if this is going to work. We had this unifying moment. Did anybody look at the eclipse? How many people looked at it with no glasses on? How many fingers am I holding up? But like a lot of things that are supposed to bring us together, you know, we also saw the president united us at this particular time. But in a strange way, even at the eclipse, he saw something most of us didn't see. I just couldn't help it. I know it's off topic, but my kids sent me this and I thought I've got to use it somehow. It doesn't really fit with anything else I'm presenting about, but. Our children are growing up in what marketers are now labeling VUCA tons, V-U-C-A, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. People are starting to describe behaviors, conditions in families and in communities that are the result of each of these factors combined with one another. Who could have predicted the summer of Charlottesville 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago? Who could have predicted that the largest media company in the world 10 years ago would be a company that doesn't have a single writer and doesn't have a printing press, Facebook? Who could have predicted that the largest transportation company in the world wouldn't own a single car, a single vehicle, Uber? Who could have predicted the largest lodging company in the world wouldn't own a single building or a single room, Airbnb? Who could have predicted 20 years ago that all of us would walk in this room with the capacity to hold 10,000 songs in our pockets? Or the Library of Congress? Or a techie? I'll just stand by and not use the slides. Okay, we won't. Here's the point. your children, like you, are showing up every day in our schools with more uncertainty, more complexity, more uncertainty than we've ever seen before. Now, I want to open with a short, you think I'm still opening again, my God, the guy's just still in the opening part. But, so I want to invite you to think about another time in the country's history when conditions might have seemed similar. And I'm going to go all the way back because some of you may have heard or seen the new show, relatively new show, Hamilton. Anyone had a chance to get to New York or and seen Hamilton? Any of you heard the music? Right. So one of the compelling pieces for me of the show is not just the brilliance of the music, the acting, the choreography, and all that kind of stuff, but the way in which the show captures one group of human beings at a moment of extraordinary uncertainty. And the signature song, for me at least, is all these young colonials, they weren't Americans yet, looking at the uncertainty in their world, looking at the conflict in their world, and the line that comes through is, "I am not throwing away my shot." It's one guy standing in front of everyone else at this moment and saying, notwithstanding everything I see, I'm not throwing away my shot. So I'm going to give you a short clip from Hamilton just to hopefully excite you about your own shot. If this works, let's see. Okay, so I'm the social and emotional learning guy, so you know I'm going to make you work a little. I'd like you right now, think ahead to this school year, and think of a shot you're not willing to throw away. Something that is inside of you, something that's in your bones, in your heart, in your marrow, some determined commitment that you will not miss. You will not allow anybody to interfere with you making sure happens. And I'd like you to pair up. Very briefly, this is going to be a very quick exercise. If you have three, you can pair up in threes. If you have one, reach behind you. We're not going to make this complicated. But I'm just going to give you 2 minutes, and here's the only part of this exercise I'd like you to think through, or just pay attention to. One person shares their shot, the other person listens. Then switch. The second person or the third person shares their version, and the other. Then you can have a little brief conversation if you want, but give yourself an opportunity to put yourself in the discussion without being interrupted. Okay, so just very quickly, if you're comfortable, grab a partner. Whether you know them or not makes no difference. What's the shot for you this year? And you guys have to do it over here. All you big shots, administrators, Pat, get over there. So we don't have a lot of time. Chris has told me I got to be off this stage in 20 minutes and I got 2 hours worth of material, but I would love, nonetheless, if anyone's willing, preferably those of you in the last row, Anybody willing to share either what they heard from up here or, yes? Big voice.
My name is Sharon King, and I am embarking on a new journey. I will have a second, third, fourth grade autism unit, and I will not allow anyone to stop me from educating and empowering my students and their parents and myself.
Wow. I kind of want to end the talk. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Yes. From the back row to the front row. Can you stand and...
Julie Clark. And we both have the same thing. We're both newly administrators, and the whole evaluation observation process, we don't want to fail our teachers. We want to hold them to the accountability that they need, but we want to make sure that they're successful. And be the support system that they absolutely need in order to make our children be successful.
Wow. Wish you had been my administrator when I was teaching. Great. Congratulations on your new positions and good luck with them. Yeah, it's great. Who else?
Tim.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sitting with one of our new deans at East this year, Denise Ordick, and even before you talked about this, she was telling me she had a plan this year. She's calling it 1,000 points of contact. She's going to make sure that this year she talks and makes contact personally with 1,000 between students and parents.
Wow.
She's going to keep a notebook on that. And I was real impressed with that, and that's the kind of people we have here in Youngstown. So.
Beautiful. Great. It's a cool story for local media too. When you're done at the end, if you've got that listed, I'm sure that's a book, better than mine too. Thank you for sharing that. I think there was one other. Was there one more? Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to share my wonderful partner, Deborah Bundy's goal to stay positive and not let anybody rob her joy.
Wow. Yes, sir.
This is on behalf of the new training principal, Bob Fryer, and want everybody to know this is a man with a vision that I can certainly get behind. You see there's people up here that are also easy to get behind, but his one shot this year, he is going to make sure that he embraces every senior that's at risk for failing. And though we don't want any of them to go down, if they go down, they're not going down without love.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I just want to say I've used this exercise, I think, with 3 large urban districts just in the last couple of weeks, really, months. I'm not comparing, but this room has depth. There's real depth here. I don't know whether it's coming partly from leadership, partly from pain, partly from excitement. Not pain from the leadership. I didn't say that. No, you didn't catch me. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I know you're laughing, but I didn't say that. Okay. One thing that strikes me, just listening to you, just very quickly, is how much time we spend on what, for lack of a better term, we think of as identity issues, identity politics, identity division, identity conflict, and how much what you're describing is what I would call much more identifiable vision. the vision that draws people forward from whatever our multiple identities are into something we can all believe in: joy, commitment to our children, love, connection, accounting for ourselves and making connections. These are visionary. You're already in a place of visionary ideas that pull people out of where they are into something new, as opposed to confirming people in where they are and potentially splitting them from each other. Cool. So, just quickly to summarize this little short exercise, in a larger classroom context, you can see quickly what we just did is what I would call a social and emotional learning exercise. And the pieces of it, as a teacher, could easily be pulled out of this experience, studying a piece of social studies. But what did you do? You did at least 3 things. 3 exercises that, if you internalize the skill, would help you and would help me. First, you had to go inward, right? So the first thing that happened, and we could have spent more time on this, is you were invited to access a part of your own goal and desire. I didn't start by saying, I'm going to teach you Hamilton. We started by saying, I want to know what you have as your vision, right? So we have a context or a setting in social studies, but the first connection to that is from within you. So to the extent emotion is about your own personal narrative, you went to your emotional life to say, what do I think, feel? What's animating my life? You had to do that briefly, quickly, but you had to do it. Secondly, you had to communicate. So you had to practice skills that would allow you to express something that might be quite personal. Maybe some of you chose not to share something that was too personal. Maybe it was difficult for you to even come up with something, so you had to try to communicate something that was not fully formed. All these things are normal. But you had to communicate, and third, you had to listen. And the extent to which you did all 3 of those things probably is the extent to which you are right now in this room, without fight or flight or executive function depression, without an amygdala hijack. To the extent you're here right now, in this room, not with your family, not with your tasks, not with the next thing going on in your life, it's probably the extent to which you were able to go inward, to express yourself, and to listen to another. And the extent to which, if we were following this up with a lesson about the American Revolution, the extent to which you'd be motivated, interested, and connected to it is the extent to which you're here. So in a very simple way, you practiced social and emotional skills applied to academic content. Now here's your plan. Now you can't see it there because I just made the slide last night and I couldn't figure out how to get the graphic separate from the rest of the text in your plan. But your leadership, together with your community, your political folks, and you, have come up with this Youngstown Why. And I'm not going to go through it because you know it all better than I do. But I want to say that when we think of the social and emotional dimensions of learning, we don't think of an additional what that we want you to teach. We wouldn't add another box to the why. We would be thinking about the how. How do you teach all of that? The top left and top right address academic outcomes and interpersonal outcomes. The question for us isn't, do we have to add an emotional outcome, or a relational outcome, or a problem-solving outcome? The question is there a how to achieving those test scores that we haven't yet tapped into as educators? Not a different what, but a new how. And so what I'm going to talk about in the remaining, we'll see, you might get a little cut from your break time. In the remaining few minutes is a vision I hope will help all of you think about how all of this gets done, but gets done in a way that is much more likely to be effective and much more likely to be fulfilling. Here's the first lesson. And if I could suggest it, probably the most difficult for educators to understand because of the way most of us were trained. in teacher prep programs, in sixth-year programs, in administration programs, and for some of us in doctoral programs. Teaching and learning is a relationship. It is not supported by a relationship. It is not helped by a relationship. It is not greased by a relationship. It is a relationship. It's a constructive act between you and your students. It is not a transmission act from you to your students. Most of us, especially high school teachers, I was a high school teacher, if you ask us what we teach, we give the subject. I teach social studies. You teach science, math, language arts, whatever it is. That is, in a sense, a distortion of what you're doing in teaching. You are not actually taking information and bolting it on to a machine. You're actually engaged in a constructive relationship where the learner is every bit as important to the transfer of information as the teacher is. Now, I got this lesson from Dr. James Comer. I don't know if any of you have heard or read Dr. Comer's stuff. When I was 24 years old, working in the New Haven Public Schools, and I went to see him to ask him for guidance because I felt like I was failing. Like I wasn't reaching my kids and I wasn't making a difference. And he did this exercise. He said, look, let me explain this to you. And he took a whiteboard in his office. He's a child psychiatrist, and he took out and he drew these two shapes. And he said, what's the difference between shape 1 and shape 2 to a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old? So I'm looking at this. I'm trained as a teacher. I'm in the classroom. I'm working after school. I'm working on weekends. I'm doing mentoring and tutoring, and I'm looking at it. And well, one's an A and one's a squiggly line, and no, that's not it. What's the difference to a 6-year-old? He said, it's very easy. The shape on the left is interesting to a 6-year-old because a significant adult wants them to know what it means. That's the only reason. There is nothing inherently interesting about the shape on the left. The only thing that can make that shape interesting is you. And the relationship with you, to the extent you see it as important, the child will see it as important. And the extent to which the child doesn't value what you think is important, the shape is not important. So if the child has not bonded with you, the child has literally, physiologically incapable of learning the importance of the shape. The brain will not attach to the information. So physiologically, the biology, I'll say a little bit more about this, will prevent the child from learning the meaning of the shape, or the meaning of Hamilton, or the meaning of the periodic table, or the meaning of Shakespeare's poetry, or whatever it is you're teaching. If the child has not internalized a relationship with the teacher or the peer or the parent that suggests the importance of the information to you makes it important to him or her. Not because it's important to the culture, not because it's important to the president, not because it's important to textbook publishers, important to you, and therefore important to me, the child. So this is what most of us think. I hate to say this but I can say it as a teacher. I'm saying this as a peer. This is how we actually think most of the time. We're stuck in a broken paradigm. We know it's broken at an intuitive level, but it's hard to break out of it. Because we think that the knowledge we're transferring was created by some scholar, written in a journal, then translated into popular knowledge, and then picked up by a textbook publisher, and then printed in some massive factory, then put on a truck and shipped to our schools, or bought by our school boards, or decided on by our superintendents and CEOs, and then put in the closet down the hall, and then handed to you as a first-year teacher, and you get told, teach this. You're the end of a supply chain, and what's coming along is an assembly line machine, and you're supposed to take that knowledge and bolt it on, one after the other as they go by. We know it's wrong. Intuitively, scientifically, theoretically, and practically. And yet we still operate in this paradigm. We don't pay attention. We don't have a science that shows us how to cultivate the inner and relational life of the child as a way of teaching. We just assume we'll figure it out. Methods, classroom management, you got a little bit of that, right? You saw a master teacher inspire kids. After all, that teacher's so creative, I just got to be like that teacher. Not true. So we set about, a whole gang of us, I'm going to go through this quickly if I can get this, no, couldn't get it to do it, but I'll do it this way then. We set about to try to figure out, is there a science in education that would equip teachers to inspire the inner life and the connections in classrooms that would enable them to be successful at teaching science, social studies, language arts, mathematics, and so on, art. Is there a way we could learn how to do this? So this framework that you're seeing in front of you is not a fad. It's not even a program. You say, is that a program I'm supposed to? No, it's not a program. It's a framework. It's a science of teaching and learning. It suggests that children will connect with you if they are taught how to do self-management and self-awareness, if they're invited to develop their relationship skills and their social awareness, if they're taught responsible decision-making, vision, a sense of the future, their own goals. If they're taught those in explicit ways, they will be better learners. Their executive function will be cracked open. Their capacity to pay attention will be improved. We know this from Dewey, we know this from Maria Montessori, we know this from Vygotsky, we know it from Comer, we know it from Bronfenbrenner. You name the scholars, we all read them at some point in our college or in our higher education. We mostly read them, and what did we do with them? Almost nothing. Oh yeah, I read Dewey. How many people read Dewey? Everybody read Dewey. What do we do with Dewey? Nothing. We say we read Dewey. Oh yes, there's a social context for education. Yeah, fine, thanks. Now, how do I teach math to third graders? We did nothing to equip ourselves with the insights necessary to translate Dewey into the classroom. So this framework is only 10 years old. So we're in a new era where we're trying to take seriously the social and emotional life of children so that we can optimize the capacity for children to receive the love, to be connected to you as individuals, kids with autism and intellectual challenges, to have the chance they deserve, for all of us to see them as worthy of the chance you want to give them. This is new work. I was introduced to it with this model when I was a high school teacher. A professor came in and said, here's a way of teaching the social and emotional development of your students to me. I was a high school social studies teacher. This is actually a 60-lesson curriculum, 6-0. You teach this for several months just to get through these steps. Don't worry, we're not going through it in that level of detail. The first, interestingly, step is by far the most important. When you have a problem, the first and most important thing you can do is stop, calm down, and think or feel before you act. Kids will rate it the highest. Every survey, teachers rate it the highest. Administrators rate it the highest. It's by far the most important. Say the problem, your feelings. So this is a framework, so I'm all excited. I use this framework in my classroom. The kids are all sparkling with insights. We're able to calm down conflicts. It's working. I take it to an after-school group I have of young men. It's called the Young Men's Leadership Group in a high school. These are all kids at risk. And the principal in those days asked me to say, hey, could you start an after-school group? Here are the kids. Got the list. It's September 15th. We already know who they are. So we organize this group. I get them to stay after school. How do you get them to stay after school? The best teaching tool ever developed? Pizza, exactly. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. You get a budget for pizza, you can do anything you want. So I've got 15 or 18 kids. They set off on service projects. I'm all excited. We're cleaning up the neighborhood, painting houses, running dances, raising money to buy jackets for the guys. The kids are connecting about issues that are important to them. They're talking about girlfriend issues, community issues, violence issues, gang issues. And one morning I get to school and the principal turns to me and says, hey, Lamont Young, he's one of your students, right? I said, yeah, he's in the leadership group. He's a good kid. He said, I want to let you know he was shot last night 7 times, point blank. I said to the principal, I said, no, it's not Lamont. No way. Maybe his brother, but he said, Tim, it's Lamont. I said, Mr. Verham, it can't be. This kid's, everything's going right for him. He's turned the corner. So Tim, he's at the hospital. He's clinging to life. He's not likely to make it. So I go down after school to the hospital. There's a police officer outside the room, no one in it. Walk in, you can imagine what I saw. You know, this young 18-year-old body wrapped in bandages and beeping sounds and fluids and lines, and an unconscious body of a bright young teenager who I can say now I loved these guys. I loved this kid. So what do? You know, stood there, I said, you know, grabbed Lamont's hand. Lamont, you know, we're all thinking about you, and sorry you're here, and guys in the leadership group asked me to come down and tell you they're pulling for you, they're praying for you, and you see this almost lifeless body. And then I saw him move his lips, and I looked down and I said, is he trying to say something? And so I held his hand, and he moved his lips again, and I leaned down, and he says to me, Shrives. That's what the kids in he didn't say Mr. Shriver, he said just Shrives. He said, next time, I'll use problem solving. And I thought to myself, you know, I don't know how many of you feel this way. Maybe those of you who are earlier in your careers might identify with it, but I thought to myself, you know, how much I had failed him. You know, how much the system had failed him. This was a good kid. This was a good, happy, smart, strong, charming, loving kid. And I'd come in with this when it's just too late. You know, he'd wanted to know how to do this. I mean, here he was, and he already could tell, even at this sort of late phase in his life, that there was an alternative, but he hadn't been able to get it. But if we'd given it to him earlier, if we'd reinforced it, if we'd shown his parents, if we taught it in 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 5th grade, it wouldn't have happened. I knew it right there, looking at him. I knew it. Now, this story has a happy ending because Lamont Young survived. And I just took this selfie last winter. This is actually in New Haven, but he's at Fordham. It's a selfie, so forgive, it's lousy photography, but anyway. He's at Fordham University doing a master's in social work today. But we shouldn't have ended up where we did. And I could put up a picture here of hundreds of Youngstown kids. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Youngstown kids in the last 10 years, and hundreds, if not thousands, of Youngstown kids today who are just like Lamont. They want the chance. They want to connect. They actually, no matter how oppositional their behavior may sometimes seem, no matter how disconnected, no matter how frustrated, stressed out, no matter how difficult life seems to them, to you, they want to use problem solving. We just got to teach them how. We got to believe in them. So why is it important? It's not just theory and story, it's actually the brain, as Tim said earlier. Let me just show you again. This is a presentation by a current brain scientist called Patricia Kuehl. She says this summarizes today's brain science and learning. I don't know if you can see it that well, but it's like one of my favorite slides now. It's just like we human beings want to model ourselves on someone else. So the social context is critical. Here's how she shows it in an experimental setting. By the age of 12 months, the infant is not only able to connect with the adult, not only able to watch what the adult is doing, but also begins to follow the adult's action. So in this little picture, you see the child looking at the instructor. The instructor looks away. The child is still looking at the instructor, but then what does the child do? Looks where the instructor is looking. That's what your kids are doing. Where you look, they look. If you connect. So when I was talking to Patricia Kuehl about this, she said, you know, oh boy, 9:05. Okay. Social connection makes your brain function. So if teachers are sometimes, if they're asked to do this, they say, oh, I don't have time. Everybody in this room will say the same thing. I would have said the same thing. I don't have time. Unless what I'm asking or offering you or suggesting that you do is actually teach better, then you'd all say, oh yeah, I've got time. Which is why when we do surveys, last year we did a survey of teachers nationwide, 93%. I think that means I'm done. I'm going to go through, these slides are here if you want them, right? So don't worry about reading them. We now have data to support the idea that higher degrees of social and emotional competence improves your physical health. It improves your happiness. This is the largest longitudinal study ever done in social science. It has one conclusion from Robert Waldinger at Harvard University. The only thing that contributes to life happiness, life satisfaction, is the quality of your relationships. I shouldn't say that. It's not the only thing. It's by far the most important thing. Everybody nods and goes, yeah, of course that's true. What do we do in schools to nurture it? Almost nothing. Explicitly, I should say. Employability, all the current trends. We've got the head of HR for Google informing this work now. Why? Because he says programmers are a dime a dozen. What we look for now is teamwork skills, independent skills, communication skills, collegial skills, the capacity to listen to others. These are the skills that differentiate someone who gets hired at Google from somebody who doesn't. They're all, he says, all socially and emotionally driven. The cost-benefit analysis on this work is 11-to-1, one of the highest return to intervention ratios ever measured by the folks at Columbia University. Every dollar invested, I'll say a little bit more about this in a second, returns $11. Here's the most important data you need to know, I believe. Krish, Tim, Pat, meta-analysis over 250 high-quality evidence-based social and emotional learning programs like that problem-solving curriculum I showed you, when implemented, not only improve social and emotional skills, attitudes, behavior, also test scores. 11 percentile point, not on grades, not on self-ratings, not on teacher ratings, standardized test scores. The intervention has nothing to do with academic content, and it improves academic achievement. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but for most teachers, when we're given the chance to think it through, it's like, oh, of course. Here's the newest study, and this is where I want to talk just a little bit about. This is longitudinal data now that includes up to 20 years after intervention with these programs. Academic performance, in the lower left-hand corner you see academic performance, SEL skills. The highest impact is on academic achievement. The median outcomes for kids who have been exposed to these kinds of instruction. The highest, even higher than on skills. So the problem-solving skills may go up, but even higher than that is the social-emotional learning scores. And then this is important, I think, Tim, for you and for others who think about appropriations and about funding. If you have a conduct disorder, these interventions reduce them by 10%. For one kid, the cost of a lifelong conduct disorder is almost $4 million to the system. One kid. So the prevention of one conduct disorder is a $4 million piece of business. If you think about even sexually transmitted disease diagnoses, arrests, I mean, these are big. The addition of one kid to a college degree is a $1 million cost savings to Youngstown, to Ohio, to the United States. So to the extent we're looking at outcomes here, we don't have to get soft, we can get very hard. In my opinion, we are at a point in time where the only question is no longer an either or. Some people would say, well, if I'm going to focus on academics, I can't focus on the social emotional side. That is a lie. We don't have the concept in education of malpractice, but in my view, and this will sound maybe arrogant or maybe even offensive to some of you, I hope not, but I'm going to say it to maybe just challenge you to think, to the extent people say, I am not interested in the social and emotional life of my children, they are guilty of malpractice, educational malpractice in my view. In my view. Two last slides and then we'll close. We have now frameworks for the district. This is the planning framework that would allow, Chris, you to look at your why and infuse it, not just with PBIS, not just with character education, but with an overall approach. The left column here, we don't have time to go into it today, establishes the framework we've learned from over 15 districts: Cleveland, Atlanta, El Paso, Oakland, Chicago. Big districts around the country that have been working with CASEL for the last almost 10 years have helped us to create a district-level planning framework that would allow the infusion of this work together with teachers. This is what most principals feel like they're confronting. Here comes another thing. Most of you started a school year and somebody like me got up and said, we got a new thing you're going to do this year. And before the school year is half out, that guy got fired probably, and the program didn't work. And they never funded it anyway. So you're used to, you're smart, you're used to ignoring people like me. I know why, I've been in the seat you're in. I don't blame you. This is not a new this is not a new widget, right? This is a framework for coordinating what goes on in your school and trying to balance it with evidence-based instructional practices and climate change strategies. A couple of last points. Is this a democratic thing? Is this a lefty thing? No. Sound educational practice has no political party. It has no political party. The only thing we should care about is whether or not this works. Not whether it sounds good to Democrats or Republicans, not whether the mayor likes it, with all due respect, not even whether the superintendent or the CEO likes it. What we should ask, and what you should challenge your leadership to do, and what they should be challenging you to do, is focus on things that work. Now, if you want to call it character, because it sounds more resonant for people who tend to lean a little more conservative, call it character. If you want to call it emotional intelligence, because that sounds better to people who lean a little more progressive, call it emotional intelligence. Doesn't really matter to me. Call it whatever you want. We have a consensus in the country, red states, blue states, urban and rural, that if we focus on this work, we get results. 2 kids to close. I was in Cleveland 2 months ago in Facing History High School. I got to meet a student who is a senior in high school who is doing his culminating project, and he explained it to me in a one-on-one. He's read 52 scholarly articles on police violence. He has studied in a school that for 3 years has invited him, his emotional life, and his relationships into the conversation. This is his project. Listen to how he has studied police violence. Now, you may agree with him or not, that's not the point. He lists in the on the upper areas not only children who are the victims of police violence, but police officers who've been killed. So he begins with an understanding, with a sense in his eye, Luis Rosa Jr., that violence is everywhere. There are so many cops killing our people. There are so many people killing our cops. What's the alternative he lists? Why can't we be equal? Look at the jump. It's not a jump from violence to peace. It's a jump from violence to equality. This is supposed to be a free country. On the back he writes, I don't have it up there, we're having a war within our people. Within our people. Why is there so much hate and racism? Why don't we understand how important one's life is? Taking parents from their kids and kids from their parents. The last sentence he writes is, they say we are all free, but we are all scared. Now, I mention this because we don't have to look far for inspiration in this field. We really don't. You're about to have 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 kids staring you in the eye in a matter of a few days. The inspiration is right there in front of you. Whether for me it's Lamont, for the teachers in Cleveland it's Luis. Here's one more. This is Melanie Garcia in Chicago. We did an assembly there with the Chicago schools that have SEL infused in their programs. Melanie Garcia gets up on a stage just like this at the microphone. She's 10 years old, and she reads the poem she's prepared in a school that has had social and emotional learning since she started. She titles it Just Because. Listen to her voice if you can. Let it go in. Just because I'm sensitive, I'm not dramatic, I'm not fragile, I'm not weak. I am emotionally intelligent. She's 10. Just because I'm smart, I'm not lonely, I'm not a loser, I'm not awkward, I am intelligent. Who's she talking to? She's talking to her peers, she's talking to the culture, she's talking to the neighborhood. Just because I'm not a loser, and I know it. You can hear a voice, you can hear a strong. Just because I'm 10, I'm not immature, hopeless, worthless, I'm young. Who's she talking to? You've been putting me down, somebody out there, because you keep calling me young. I'm not ready, I'm too little, I can't. Wrong! She's like, I'm young, now what? Just because I'm a girl, I'm not worried about my looks, I'm not bad at sports, I'm not weak, I'm me. Gender, race, culture, identity, 10 years old, a fierce, determined, focused, motivated, connected learner. In Chicago, in a tough neighborhood, all that stuff, she's ready. You want to put a bet on where Melanie Garcia will be 5, 10, 15 years from now? Don't bet against her. Odds against her, maybe. Is she preparing herself? Is she learning? Is she connecting to her teachers? Is she confronting them as a function of her own interior strength, unlocked, activated, and invited into the school? I believe she is. I'll leave you this only to say that the popular culture is also creating space for us. And then I promise this is the end. Our kids may not listen to other kids from Cleveland or Chicago or people from scholarly academic environments or politicians or educators or experts or whatever we want to call ourselves, but they do listen to people like Pharrell. And here we have popular cultural figures. Listen to the language. The world is a beautiful place, but it doesn't work without empathy and inclusion. Doesn't work. So the kids are hearing this in the language. Not all of them. I know there's plenty of popular figures who are not talking this language. But we have people we can anchor our stories to as teachers in the popular culture who will help us show the kids that there is space for empathy, for inclusion. If you need even more inspiration, this is Scarlett Lewis. She is a Sandy Hook parent, and that's her little boy who was killed in Sandy Hook. And Scarlett Lewis has created a curriculum It's a social and emotional learning curriculum, and it's called Choose Love. She dedicates it to Adam Lanza, who took the life of her little boy. Because, she says, anybody that had that much pain deserves our attention and our care. So Scarlett goes to a place of forgiveness that most of us, certainly me included, can't go to. But she's an invitation. This Choose Love curriculum, look at that little boy. This Choose Love curriculum that she's got, she's trying to get evidence for, and she's working on it, schools are adopting, is putting classrooms and kids and teachers in places they never dreamed possible. And their scores are going up. So don't worry, Krish, the scores will go up. The scores will go up. The scores will go up. But the scores will go up when we teach the whole child. Thank you very much. Thank you.